That's what I was looking for. All right, good evening, everyone. This is Chairman Mike McCoo calling to order the meeting of the Willington School Building Committee, August 16th, 2023 at 6:34 p.m. I'd like to welcome everybody back. It's been a while since we've had a meeting. We're going to start with present to speak. I'll start in the room. Are you here to speak? Okay, we'll go online. Nick, I see your hand raised.
Hey, Nick Tello, 49 Myrtle Road. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I know everything was, at times things were intense during these meetings and everything, but I just want to say appreciate everyone for their efforts and such. And especially thankful to the board members that were able to counter with factual information throughout. And I hope in the future, board members are able to continue to speak out publicly and such. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present to speak? If you're online, unmute, call out your name for the record. All right, we're moving on. Chairperson report. I'll keep it brief at this point because really we have one true goal tonight to work on our final report. I'd just like to thank people for hanging in. The last few weeks have been challenging, I think, for a lot of us for time with vacations and various things going on. We had a little lull in the action for the committee, but I think everyone on this committee believes that the best thing we can do now is to try to report our information forward for anybody else who will be looking at it or people in the future as a matter of a record. So I'm looking forward to us working together and digging in for this last task to wrap up our business. So that's it for chairperson report. Shall we get on to old business review and discussion of our report?
Before we do that, I have a question. Do we have any outstanding minutes?
We do have outstanding minutes. Okay. We still don't have a recording secretary, so we're going to end up needing to. We didn't I thought I heard last week we still don't.
I don't know that.
That we don't, or that we do?
I don't know that we have a recording.
Yeah, I heard last week we still don't. So, okay. As I said before, I would eventually go through the videos if I have to, and I'll make the minutes, based on the video and the recollection of the meeting, and get them out to everyone to look at. My hope was we'd come up with a secretary in the meantime and have that person do it because they get paid for it. I won't. All right. So review and discussion. There has been somewhat of a draft report sent out. It's a framework. Some areas are well filled in, some areas are still missing. All of it is up right for editing and conversation. A couple people on the committee have contributed comments that have been put in, considered and kind of stirred in to the mix that we have so far. So this is essentially like a working meeting here.
Yeah, I submitted an outline as I saw. Just overall comments.
Go ahead.
It would have been helpful to do page numbering here.
Okay.
For discussion purposes in a meeting like this, it's a 29-page document. When you start talking about the minutia, it would be good to be able to point to a page.
Okay. That's easy.
I think some of the lengthy topics in this document should be briefly summarized in the formal text of the report, and the meat of that topic added as an appendix. And then lastly, and I mentioned this to Phil when I came in, strip all the external links out of the document and either include those references as appendices, because those links may not function down the road. So for any future committee that would like to research what we did, may not be able to find those documents if we rely on live links on a computer somewhere.
Oh, so you're saying instead of putting the links in the appendices, put the actual documents that the links would point you to?
There's a couple of pages here that point to or that have live links in them.
Right.
I don't think we should do it that way.
Right, I'm asking, do you want the link in the appendices
If
or do
it's
you want the
pertinent.
actual document?
No,
That
if
the
it's
link goes to.
pertinent, the document should be in the.
Right, okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying.
No, I don't think we should use any links at all.
Gotcha, okay.
Because any future committee is
Those
probably
links
going to
may
be
not-
looking at a paper to copy.
And links could have changed in that time. And
Links will have changed more than likely, and trying to go to a dead link is challenge.
Could you do both?
I was thinking the same thing.
You could, Phil, but I would include the link within the appendix.
I think the thing that the link does in the document is it lets you know that there's a document.
Or, right, put that link internal to the document. I know you can do that in right, Acrobat, I think you can do it in Word, where you link to another page.
Yep.
And then on that, in that appendix, put the link to an external document. I'd still include that document.
we could,
Just a little bit of redundancy is better than no.
you could do the link in the main document and then put see also and have the click to take you to the appendix.
Yeah.
So you'd have the option of going to the appendix or the live link, because when the report first goes out, people are gonna read it and they'll be able to use those live links because they're still gonna exist when the report first goes out.
Yeah, the only other thing is, it's gonna have to be a PDF and then all of those documents merged together. You won't be able to put them into this specific document because of formatting and stuff. It's gonna be a nightmare. So we can just say Appendix A and whatever goes to the town clerk. Is that where it goes? Where's the final report go?
Or
Selectmen,
the selectmen.
but it's gotta be filed somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm
wherever
assuming
it gets
the clerk will
filed,
file
it should, all of those documents, I think is your point, should be there that are referenced in here. If it's talking about enrollment study, the full enrollment study can be there. If it's talking about ed specs, the ed specs can be there, whatever it is. Because to put them into this document quickly turns into 300, 400 pages, I think. Between QA and M and just everything we've done.
Yeah,
I don't know.
okay, so let's,
What I'm trying to do, to accomplish by this is point people in the right direction, get the information. But also, shrink this document, because I don't think that folks are gonna give a 29-page document as much scrutiny as something a little more summarized.
The other option,
And then if they need the detailed information, they know where to find it.
the other option is to just get an executive summary up front. You know, size 2, 3 pages. I don't know if it's worth the effort for a 29-page document, which is mostly
Yeah.
graphics, honestly. But
I mean, the ed
Okay.
spec portion that's in here grabs a couple pages because it's just square footage. That'd be
Yeah.
easy to dump and just say, see the ed spec. I don't think the same thing with like the enrollment study. It's really the graphs. It's not. I agree with you, Ralph, from the standpoint of when we did this initial research and we're going out and trying to find the final report. Okay, where's the enrollment study that was with it? That was someplace else. Okay, where's the report on that was from the land? That's someplace else. Like, if someone goes to this again in an official capacity, I'm not talking about a townsperson, you know, I'm talking about official capacity, like they want to do the research to see if this is coming back up, the documents need to be put together. So you don't have to go, where is that? Because it's a pain to do that.
Wouldn't it be that way if the enrollment table, for example, instead of having it in the documents and the appendices, wouldn't it all still be together?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying, like, if we just
Hard
take out
copy
the
in a
grid
binder?
and its reference, does the grid really matter? Does the ed spec square footage really matter? I don't know if it does at this point. I think as long as people know it was done, and you can go to it for reference, I guess is not the intent of, what's the intent of this final piece? You
right.
know?
Is it a comprehensive, all-encompassing document, or is it a summary of the findings of the committee? That's kind of the thing.
I would lean more towards the latter.
Yeah.
You know, the ed spec could be summarized quite honestly, into a paragraph or two and not include the tables. I'm not saying the tables are not relevant, because I think they are relevant, but I don't
Just
think
not
they
in
need to
this.
be in the main body.
Right.
That's
I'm
all.
not sure if I'm following. So let's say in the summary, we discussed the ed specs because they were important. And as a reference to the appendices, if you want to see the full ed spec.
Correct.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that work?
No, that does.
Oh, it
I
does.
think-
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
That's what we're
Okay,
suggesting.
and then everything's still together. Can't.
Right, it just isn't necessarily in the body of the
Right,
report.
right,
It's
which I think is
it's as
better.
an attachment
I
on
think that's
agenda.
better than you just die in the body.
Right, you summarize what the ed spec told us.
I agree.
It's the same thing with the land, like the site evaluations for the land. The font is like
Oh,
3.5, right?
We tried to split that, it looks like. but
And it's
didn't
still
have-
hard to see it. So again, the intent is to go, for someone to go, oh, they did look at a lot of land. Like, you're not gonna use that document to see what land we looked at.
Same thing for referendum questions. I couldn't read the font when I printed it out.
Right.
It was illegible. And those are probably important to see.
So it's just a matter of which of those pieces do people want to
Right.
see there.
Catherine, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good points being brought up, and as I'm skimming over it, it does feel like it needs a little more summary, because this is a report we're sending to the Board of Education, I mean, the Board of Selectmen, right? So
Right.
we want to basically said, this is the committee that was created, these are the things, almost like a timeline. I feel like maybe we should do a timeline similar to what Scott did in his letter, and just summarize the things that we did and then point to an appendices, like you guys were saying, as an attachment. But to bury all of that data into the report, I think we're gonna miss the purpose of the report.
Right.
Exactly.
I think the other thing we keep in mind also is this report has sort of two audiences in time. It has one audience in purpose, which is the town, the public, the town of Wellington. But there are two audiences. It's gonna get gobbled up right away by the people who have been involved or who are interested right now, the people who've been following meetings, or maybe someone new who moved to town, members of committee, members of other committees in town. There'll be an initial reading of this report, and then we have to remember our clarity and our summary matters even more for the people 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. Because those people won't have had the privilege and the honor of having been through this 2.5 years of meetings, and so they'll be coming in wondering, maybe they had not seen any of the drama of the last 2.5 years or any of the boredom of the last 2.5 years. And they need to get an accurate, a reasonable summary of all of that. And so we have to figure out how how this report gives enough information, either in the body or in the addenda, that the people 5 years from now, or whatever, who maybe are making a new attack at this problem, can make use of the work we do.
Yeah, and Mike, if I can just add one more thing, I think it's also important, as you mentioned, there are different audiences. But I think this report is going to the audience of the Board of Selectmen. I keep wanting to say education. And so I believe this report is one that we're gonna say, basically, they created this committee. Here's what we've done, and we look at our charge and we address all the items in the charge as best we can in a summary that said, we fulfilled this item by doing the following, something like that. I think that's going to be important to the Board of Selectmen readers to say, well, I created this committee, what have they done? And how do I know if this is the right step to take by closing this committee? Well, this report is going to say that it is, because we've done everything in there with the exception of, I think, hiring the architect to build the building, but yeah, I think that's, or in one recommendation or the other, I think that's going to be important, is that we communicate that to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I think it'd be very easy to do a status of the charge items. We could just, you could almost do it in a chart and just say, you know, unable to complete, not approached, completed,
Right.
whatever, just do a quick table. And
Right.
then the summary, the text of the report will be the information that explains those things. But I think it's a good idea to address the charge letter because that really is our reason to exist. For
Yeah.
our purpose.
Yeah, and there's one item on the charge that I think we've talked multiple times in our past meetings over the last 2.5 years. Is regarding if we were to go to a new school, what happens to Hall? What happens to Center? And I think there's an item on the charge that says that we should put together recommendations of what would happen to either of those schools, even though a choice was not made to either renovate or build. I still think we can make those recommendations because we've talked about it in multiple meetings.
I think within the limits of what we've covered, yes, we can say this is what we learned to this point.
Exactly.
Firm recommendations, we probably can't make because we didn't investigate them deeply enough. We can't provide cost estimates. We can't do that kind of stuff because we didn't get there.
Right. And I don't think it asked for estimates. I think it just asked for recommendations. And I think we've talked about some of those ideas, like, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Item
So
10 was.
So I think that's just something that we have to just sort of formalize, maybe in a summary.
Yeah.
Potential future considerations.
Yeah, and if you look back, I don't know, I hope everyone had a chance to review the report we sent out, that Phil sent out weeks ago, which was the one from the last committee. They did a pretty good job of some of these things we're talking about in the previous report. And interestingly enough, some of their recommendations and decisions rang true exactly in our process this time also. Even though we went at it sort of independently and re-looked at everything. Like, for example, there was more detail than I had remembered about why the Youngerman property was not satisfactory. We did our own independent study of that with our consultant and determined the exact same thing that was determined in the previous report about the Youngerman property, which I think is good as far as corroboration. And I think actually, you know, we could decide whether it's appropriate for us to say it or not, but maybe one of our recommendations is, since 2 committees in a row have determined that property is not viable for a school, the town should consider either allocating that property for a different purpose or getting it back on the tax rolls.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's a recommendation we put in our report.
Yeah.
Or maybe we should just say the town should consider doing something else with the property and give up the idea that it's ever gonna be a school.
I think your last statement is pertinent, give up using it as a school.
Yeah.
But Public Works utilizes that property now,
Right.
and I would proceed cautiously about thinking about
Yes.
selling that because we
Right.
might be on the hook for
Clean it up.
remediation issues. Okay, can we move on to top of the page says information gathered by the school building committee? There's no page number.
Let's go before moving on. Can we agree to number these all the same? So if you jump back and forth, we know where we are.
To number the pages?
Yes, yes. I made the cover 1 and then
Oh, for the purpose of tonight's
Yeah.
discussion?
or I'll change it if I want, you know.
Sure, if people want to mark their printout. I have,
I'm 1
well,
through,
I guess I can insert page numbers on my screen.
1 through 23
29.
is what I have, including colors.
PDF is 29 pages.
That's what I printed. Yeah.
Not
I got a
yours.
Word document. No.
Oh, I did print the Word document. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have printed an earlier version. You know
Mine
what,
is
my,
35,
Mine's 35.
Why don't you just go page by page and just,
Google Docs.
yeah.
I started.
Anybody have any comments? Next
Okay.
page. Anybody have any comments? Next
Yeah.
page.
gotcha.
Because we can just
Sorry,
insert
sorry.
page numbers as we go.
Okay,
Yeah,
can I resume? Peter, you may go. Okay.
carry on.
Thank you, thank you. The
Apologize.
page that has at the top, information gathered by the school building committee.
What page number is that? We're getting
Just couldn't leave it alone.
Should come before The ed spec development. There's a more appropriate location for it. Then it can be followed by the ed spec development and enrollment study, et cetera. Trying to get it into more. The information gathered is kind of an overview, and then the subsequent pages that follow it.
And so you're saying you feel that helps set the
This should be
stage for the
earlier,
rest of
yes.
the, yeah.
Where are you, Ralph?
Yeah, I can't find it.
Sorry, on the top of the page says, information gathered by the school building committee.
It's just like 4 pages past the history.
It's
No,
the
yeah.
first page after the ed spec,
Yes,
all
It
the
is.
data.
It is page 9 on your document, Catherine.
Okay, thank you.
Page 8 out of mine.
Oh, you know what happened? It looks like it's in the bottom of the previous page, and so I couldn't see the heading.
Where's the top of it say again?
information gathered by.
Immediately
Yeah, it's
following.
on that heading is on the previous page. So all I saw was bullets. I'm there now.
Point again, Ralph, what was this?
So he's just saying,
Move it earlier in the
move
document.
it earlier.
Oh,
See, it's not at the top of my.
So
page.
like, it would be, the introduction would be the background information, which includes the charge. Then it would go into the history of the facilities, and then it would go into information gathered by the committee.
I think that's a better sequence.
Yes, no, I agree. And then go into the ed spec. I don't think, I just scrolled through quick, Ralph, did you see anything else in there that order wise? I think the ed enrollment study would be okay where it is. Grant information would be okay. I think order other than that,
And I'm glad you said that, Ralph, because I felt like something felt like it was just a little out of the flow, and I think that might fix it.
So we're gonna leave this enrollment chart in the body of the report.
Well, that's a separate conversation.
Separate conversation. So
Yeah,
a lot of
this
those
is-
things should be appendices.
Yeah, I think we'll look at that as the stripping out of those things as a separate.
What about history of the facilities? Is that gonna be an appendices as well?
I think that doesn't take a lot of room. I think that's probably good to have there. That came up so much in conversation. It helps to set the stage for why a lot of the conversation about looking at renovation versus new, because of various condition assessments and ages. The potential for remediation and all that. I think it works in the document.
What do you guys think about a timeline similar to what, sort of what Colliers was doing, but just on a very generic? Like he did it sort of in paragraphs. Paragraph discussion, like, population and space standard discussion. He kind of did it as like headings, and I'm just wondering, do we just utilize that text into the, or are you guys thinking we're gonna actually attach Collier's memo?
I think we definitely want to attach Colliers.
I think it's an attachment.
Yeah.
I think we, we summarize a couple key points and attach it, yeah.
Because some of this stuff is duplicative. And so. do
Oh,
we-
yes, some of that is because of it being sort of a working document as we're adding in comments from people. It then requires you to go back through and sort of rationalize it all again.
Yeah, that's
so
why
we-
I'm one, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if we just do our summary, we address the charge, components, that'll be the start. And then we reference, the fact that we hired Colliers to assist us in the process. And then we touch on the topics where we've made a lot of progress, like the land assessment, the review, the existing condition assessment of Hall School, the enrollment study, some of those impacts. I don't know if we bring in the appraisals. I don't know if, I mean, that's work that we did. We did appraisals. We did look at new land and the existing property. I don't know if we put that in here. We did environmental stuff. I mean, do we put that in here? Or do we just reference it and say what we did? As part of our due diligence for seeking a new property, we did environmental phase 1 and 2A assessments, and the appendices are attached for the results. So just some thoughts, and maybe when it comes to project costs and funding, we let it be referenced by the Colliers report, because they really developed that.
Okay, I've got some notes from that. Other areas? Ralph, did you have more stuff in your review that you?
Of course I do.
Then let's hear something.
Okay, site selection. I think the following 3 pages after site selection should be an appendix. There you go. Paragraph titled site selection.
Page 18, Catherine.
What's at the top of the page, Ralph? Site selection. In the PDF file.
If that is the,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the
You
Word
jumped ahead.
document we got yesterday
Oh.
is formatted completely differently.
Okay. I didn't print that one.
yeah, it's a paragraph down the page. Yeah.
Okay, so, and what are you proposing?
So he's saying that that first text is
First text,
fine,
the
but
simple
then,
table, and the summary below that, fine.
but then the charts,
The 3 pages that follow should be in an appendix. Yep. Agree with that?
Can't read them anyway.
Well, that too, yes.
yeah, and then the only thing I would do is I would bring the Youngerman property evaluation comment. I would keep some of that in the body of it, because that's, town already owns it. It's a bad penny that keeps on rolling back. So we should put right in the report that it was evaluated and again determined not to be appropriate.
I vaguely remember the acquisition of that property.
Hmm,
It was not,
it was sold as being the location for the new school.
without ever investigating it.
Yep, I remember.
Back then, I don't have space demands.
Ralph, while you're in a lull, I want to jump back a few pages.
Go
On
for it.
something I marked up on my hard copy. This is where the Wellington enrollment chart projection is at the top of the page. The midsection was site school construction grant information. Like page 7, but I'm sure it's meaningless.
Page 11 on the Word document.
State school construction grant information?
Yes, I see enrollment study and then right below it. Yep.
And I was looking at this and that 5th bullet, renovation status, and it references the renovation as new. And I never understood that standard very clearly. I see we define what renovation status is, and Jimmy might be able to weigh in on this. But I think definitions are important, especially for future folks that follow us. And is there a definition of renovation as new? Because that was a term we frequently used.
Well, it's the title of the state's application. That's what they call the application. It's the renovate as new application or the renovate as new request.
And that's the statutory language right below it.
So that renovation status, that is renovation to new, that's the definition of it? Or is that just renovation if you're renovating the building versus a new building?
The application language does not align exactly with the general statutes language. That's what's throwing you and all the rest of us off.
Okay, so it's not a fixable problem. There's no definition.
Well, there's
Or
a,
it's subjective.
this means that.
Yeah.
Basically,
Got it.
right? I'm saying that correctly, right, Phil?
Far be it.
The terminology does not line up exactly between them.
I think that was confusing to a lot of.
As best I could tell from talking to Scott Pellman and other people who have worked in the school stuff, that the term renovate as new came about to try to guide away from people thinking they could just renovate a little nugget versus, and because that was a different kind of a project. If we were gonna renovate a little nugget of the school, as opposed to renovate to a more of a, more of a holistic view of the facility.
Yeah, and I understand the practical.
Yeah,
Side
and
of
they,
this,
but the general statutes and the procedural stuff don't marry up exactly, the wording.
Now, is it renovate as new or renovation as new? One's a noun, one's a verb.
Yes. You caught me on the technicality, yes.
But I think,
Well, thanks.
I think Peter has a point with that. The definition as as this committee understood it would be helpful because DAS and OSCGR may change that definition sometime down the road. Could be.
Might have been today.
But as we understood it, as it was defined for us.
Right.
Because I think that's pertinent to any subsequent school building.
I mean, that had a major impact on how we understood the fire report. It made virtually any of the renovation options cost prohibitive if that standard was applied strictly.
Yes.
Then you listen to Rusty when he did his kind of synopsis for us, and then it seemed different. So I think you're right, Mike. This may have some type of subjectivity to it that
Yes,
might be useful for the folks that follow us to ponder.
right. Yeah, as soon as there's any lack of clarity, you get a lot of different interpretations.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's a good question to ask. Especially since we can tell you there's no answer.
Why am I not surprised?
It doesn't make it a
It's the
bad
state of
question.
Connecticut.
Right.
But Mike, you're saying, getting back to Ralph's area here, the Youngerman property evaluation would stay in the body. Because that's
At
kind of
least,
relevant.
at least a paragraph that indicates that. It doesn't necessarily mean that exact format, but I think the comment should be right in the report, because that was detailed in the previous report also.
And I remember us being confused at that time, so I think it's a good idea.
Focusing on the physical,
At the end of the land evaluation charts, there's a section about the Youngerman property.
there's a section there of site evaluation town properties. Right below that.
It says Youngerman property evaluation from the 92 school building committee report. And I think when you and I were discussing, we dropped that in there to make sure we came back to address that. Because it was discussed in 92, we found the same information now, so we should make sure this gets
It just needs.
cleaned up and formatted and inserted.
It needs a blurb.
Yeah.
Similar to the 1992 report.
Yep.
I'm not so sure bringing electric power to it is essential to that paragraph.
Well, that was just a copy
That
and
was a
paste
big
from the
issue for us in
previous
1992.
report because, to make sure a placeholder, to make sure we had a conversation for this report.
No, I understand, but I don't think the cost numbers are valid in this report.
Oh, correct, yeah, and the situation's completely different too, because there is three-phase electric power right up the street now.
Right.
Yeah,
Actually, it goes right past it.
yeah,
It is on the street now, which it wasn't.
that was not there in 1992.
I think it ended at the truck stop property, right, the sewage treatment plant at the truck stop. I think.
Oh, it is.
It was under construction, I think, in
In
92. I think it was under construction.
I just remember there being no power there. We said,
The,
stay on this.
I think the truck stop was built, but the hotel was not yet at that time.
The truck stop and FedEx, I think, were constructed about the same point.
Yes. Truck stop started just before FedEx, yeah.
Because they had to work out an agreement on a realignment of River Road.
Yeah.
Between
Starting at the pump.
RPS,
Yeah.
yeah, between RPS, the state, and that entity is, Jagir is no longer involved, they sold it, it's been sold.
So, yeah, he's retired too from his,
It should,
yeah.
it should be employed, so.
All right. All right, comments from somebody else before we go back to Ralph?
Yeah, Mike, I'm just rereading some of the memo. I'm just curious if there was one author to the school building committee recommendations. And I asked that because there seems to be a pattern of we could have done this, we should have done this, we screwed up here. And I don't know if that's something that you would put in a report to the Board of Selectmen. I think the Board of Selectmen is looking for us to address what they've asked us to do. And while I appreciate some of these comments, and while some of them may be very true, I'm just not sure some of them are true. And so I'm just curious, was this a compilation of multiple people's opinions, or is this one person's opinion? And I'll just give you an example. The charge under school building committee recommendations, it's on my page.
It's a compilation.
Yes, it is a compilation of some of Phil's work, some of my work, I think some of Jim's comments. I don't know if, did we have anybody else's comments pulled into that? Oh, Ann, yes, I'm sorry. So there are
Okay.
4 of us. So again, because this is, and I'm not trying to negate your comment
Oh,
is
it's
valid.
fine.
But just so you know, it's sort of got assembled and put in.
Yeah.
So that people could see what was sort of bubbling.
Yeah.
And then we should work to clean it up. So
Okay,
I agree how we say it, how we frame it. And
Is
the
important.
voice we use, if you will be important as we clean this up. And I did wrestle with some of the comments I added into it. I
Yeah.
wrestled with how I stated those comments, and I thought, well, I'm gonna get them in there right now so that we can talk about it and try to figure it out.
yeah, that's fine.
Because I don't want to spend a lot of time sort of sounding negative, but trying to figure out what's valuable about what we learned. Like if we
Exactly.
learned we could have done something differently, or we should have done something differently, or something went bad. If we can find the right way to pass that information forward, it could really be a benefit to the next person who's looking at this, or the next committee that's working on it, or whatever. Or maybe someday when they write the big novel and we all become stars.
So I have a few comments if you're willing to hear them. So like
Yes.
under the charge, for example, it says the charge the SBC was operating under proved to be too limiting. So for an adequate assessment of the full project and cost impact to the town. More flexible charge, or the willingness to explore its implementation more flexibly could have been beneficial. I'm just trying to understand that, because I thought, I mean, was it in the initial charge of us, our charge of consolidating? And I'm just trying to understand this particular.
I think that comment came from me originally, actually, Catherine, and I think my intent, this goes back a month or 2 now, was basically that there were a lot of questions as to what will become of Center and Hall, and what would become that we felt weren't able to be addressed but that weren't easily addressed by the committee because it wasn't in the charge. You know,
I
we're
see.
having that option, so it was, there were a lot of community, my thought process behind it was there was a lot of community questions that this committee couldn't or wasn't able to address because it wasn't a very strict interpretation of one of the 10 items in the charge.
Yeah, so it really limit, the fact that it wasn't listed in there I mean, maybe it could have said like, explore any and all options necessary to adequately assess, you know, yeah, something like that.
This
But-
was, yeah, having the ability to more easily follow avenues that it came across.
Thank you, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, I think the intent of that comment is very valid for our report. We can tweak how it's worded, but I think the intent of that is important to say that we encountered challenges with the charge.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that's impactful in the future where the next organization can have either narrower or broader, depending on which item in the charge,
Yeah,
to give them the ability to either focus on something specific or to have some more, like the assessment, if people want more work done on what do we do with the old buildings before we get to referendum, then maybe that should have been broadened and allowed to happen in the charge. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm saying it's one of the things we talked about.
yeah, I think for this particular one, and just an idea, maybe we could say, for example, you know, and just give the example that Jim just mentioned. It's just a thought, you don't have to put it in here, but I'm just thinking, because I was reading the charge as, I thought it was pretty specific of consolidation, which is what I thought it was, but I couldn't understand what the limiting piece of it was, but since Jim, you just mentioned that, you're spot on. Had we been able to take it a step further and go that route with the evaluation of the existing schools, maybe we could have done a little more and brought a little more to the table for the townspeople.
There were a number of times in meetings when the topic would come up and the retort from various quarters was, it's not in the charge. And I think that proved to be overly restrictive on particular topics. And then I'm not going to try and recall anything specific, but I do know that that was a common retort to suggestions as we went along. And I think that impacted, and I think that might be the motivation for part of this.
Yeah, it did upset members of the public sometimes as well.
Yes,
Yes.
right.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah,
it's all about building.
I want to enthusiastically agree with this comment, Jeff. Particularly the words "too limiting." Because I felt from the very beginning, we were very constrained by the charge. Not just in specific areas like the disposition of the existing buildings, but when the town meeting was forming the school building committee prior to selecting, even selecting this group, there was a lot of discussion at that meeting, and the selectmen running the meeting assured everyone that there would be a full evaluation of the need for a new school. And that was immediately lost in the charge. It was, you will follow the edict presented by the Board of Ed, that this is what they want. And I think the townspeople had a disconnect with that. I think they were expecting us to be more of a town committee that was going to perform an evaluation of the needs as well as the specifics. So I like this too limiting language here. I felt it was troublesome internally on the committee, externally with the town, and often put us in a role where we were waiting for, I mean, for the first year, it seemed like we said we couldn't move forward because we were waiting to bring Scott on board, experts, feedback from state bureaucrats and departments. And it just seemed like the charge prevented us from being a town committee. So I like this, and I like Catherine's idea of including examples, and I'll pull together some of my own to submit.
Just the time that it took to get the ed spec back to this committee.
I have a whole paragraph on that.
I mean, look at the timeline that occupied, which kind of limited us in a number of areas because we didn't have the ed specs. We can't address that.
Yeah, so Mike, if you don't mind, I just have a couple more comments on this and then,
Chime in first. Listen, I'm like taking deep breaths over here.
oh,
I
I'm
think-
sorry.
No, it's not you. I think it's important to realize the purpose of this report is not to moan about things that happened. It's about how they move forward, right? So if you want to give examples, and I agree, we need examples in there because no one had any idea what you meant, right? So if we have to ask you what you meant by that, it shouldn't be in the report. So we need to be very clear about what we're recommending for the future. That's the purpose of this report.
Mhm.
So if you believe that the charge was not, it didn't allow us to do X, Y, and Z, you need to explicitly say what you mean, not just say agree to the owl, okay? And it's the same thing for you, Ralph. I think if you didn't like that the ed spec was there in time, it's too late to complain about it. It is what it
No, I
is.
understand.
The point is,
You're right.
say it in the report to say, it is critical to have the ed spec in time for the next school building committee to review this point. That, I think that's what needs to be said, not,
No, you're absolutely correct.
I think there are a couple things coming out in this conversation that we could recommend should happen at the very beginning of a future process or be ready to happen at the beginning of a future process to help lay a better foundation. Whether that's an up-to-date evaluation of the current buildings. Again, you'll run into the problem of what is the cost of doing that. You know, we've already talked tonight about things that are potentially in conflict with what we talked about during. So we're gonna have to make sure we rationalize these things, because if we had a broader scope and we could have met the desire to evaluate the old buildings more, we still would have had to go into the taxpayers and get money to do those evaluations, which we found problematic also. Sometimes because we didn't present things properly, sometimes because the townspeople just didn't want to fund certain things. So we have to make sure that we frame things, not only what do we do in the future, what's a recommendation going forward, but we have to make sure we fund things that we present things that have sort of a realistic basis, in that we're going to have to balance how much we can do and how broad we can be with getting people to pay for that. And what will the taxpayers want? You know, will the taxpayers want us to have a broad scope and we run around and do a whole bunch of evaluations and learn a whole bunch of information, which would make the committee's work easier maybe? But the townspeople may say, no, we went through this last time, we gave 100,000, then we gave you another 100,000, and we wanted it back or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, because that's been a lot of conversation.
That's a great point, Mike.
Get back to Phil's comment for a moment, and Phil, I don't disagree with you. Timely development of an ed spec early on in the process is essential.
yeah, I think that's what
How's
should be
that?
said here. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the feedback, right? When you read the things that are in here about the Youngerman property, right? The thing that's just below what we're talking about right now is concluded that additions to either school are not viable for a number of reasons. That's from the prior report, right? So I think it's this committee's job to also say, if they agree with that statement, that this committee then says that. It's just moving, it's looking for points of clarity and not guessing. I think that's my biggest thing is so what we learned from it, again, ed spec related, was it would have been really beneficial to have the ed spec at X point before Y happened, right? That's what needs to be said. So that way the next committee kind of has that book, because no one has this stinking book, guys. No one has it.
Right.
It's different.
So let's try to leave them with a little bit of a guideline for the next time.
And that's also the reason I really advocate for having all of these other things in here, grids. It's about links, but I think your point is well taken about the links, but the documents, so that they see the work that was done. If there's redundancy, and Catherine about the project cost summary, I agree with that. That's fine. There's other, as long as it's there someplace. I think the biggest part of this report that needs the feedback is not the stuff that's already in here. It's in the section we're in right now, the recommendations and lessons learned, like this should happen next time. The charge, what about the charge would have made our job easier? That's what we need to state.
Yeah.
What, language in the charge hindered us. I think it's fair to say that. And why? I just think that's how you move forward. When you're 20 years down the road and looking at this again, we don't want to leave that up to chance. Someone going, I don't know who said that, Jim Marshall. Let's see if we can find the YouTube recordings. YouTube's still alive. I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's right.
It'll have a new name.
Yeah.
But it'll still be there.
Thanks, Captain.
Woke out there.
So just kind of, if I might, suggest thinking about what we're doing tonight, I think we should finish getting any of the comments that any of us have so far. And then I think we should either through notes or memory or whatever, then we should leave here with the idea that we should provide back some feedback on the things we're talking about. We've dug into a couple good things here. So while it's fresh in our minds, let's just email it back to me or whatever. Hey, based on that discussion last night, I think A, B, C, and D. And let's get some stuff back that we can boil back into this while it's fresh in our minds. And we'll make some edits based on that conversation and see if the next version is getting us closer. That should be our goal, right? That we fill in gaps and start cleaning up. Ralph.
Not where I was.
Pick a page.
Huh? Pick a page? Yeah, pretty much. Well, we can stay on the same topic. Couple of paragraphs here that I strongly object to.
You're still in the recommendation stuff? Okay.
Is the last two paragraphs.
Hang on, I
starts up,
gotta get where you are. Okay, go ahead.
Is it bullets? Or
No, above the bullets.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Those two paragraphs. But honestly, I would like to see them taken out in their entirety.
Starting with what, Carol?
Future committees should address. And then a lack of uniform support.
okay, so let's start with the first one. Each committee should address any and all the possible methods of the current times. The committee should also get clarity between the meeting. Well, I'm sure you don't like these because there were times when you might have been the person who was on the outs in some of this, or not in the agreement with the rest of the committee, in the minority. There were a couple times I was the person who was in the minority.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, this was very significant in our operation, and it led to a lot of disarray and discourse, particularly as we got close to the referendum. And people in the future should be aware that it needs to be understood. They need to be aware of it. Everyone I've talked to, from the consultants to people in other towns, even Jim's experience doing it for other towns, the committee is unified behind their charge. And maybe that speaks all the way back to the charge needing to be better, but they're unified behind their charge. And once the majority makes a decision to go a certain direction, the committee essentially works to get that direction to be successful. We didn't have that here, particularly as we got towards the referendum. We had one group of people in the majority saying, let's move forward with this option. We had another group saying, we have to do anything possible to make sure this option doesn't happen, basically. And so some people, and there were times I had the feeling as the chairman that it was essentially, it ended up resulting in essentially a certain amount of sabotage to the committee's work. And so we need to do a better job of it, even if it's a better job of writing the charge, or a better job of the next person chairing the committee to get more unity in the committee.
I understand what you're trying to say, Mike. On the other hand, though, I want you to consider Congress. A bill gets moved to the floor. Okay? There's a number of members of Congress who do not support that bill, yet it moves to the floor. Those members of Congress who are in disagreement have every right to speak out and vote against it? Supreme Court almost always has a dissenting opinion. And there's
But they
absolutely,
are a representative form of government. We are not a representative, we are a committee to do a job, and we should be unified to do that job.
That implies a kind of tyranny of the majority, like that
No, it
I don't-
it applies majority rule,
I don't-
which is a basis of our democracy.
and that's fine, but that doesn't mean the minority is gagged or stifled.
No, I understand
And
that,
that's what you're
but it was
suggesting.
more than, it was
That's what you're
beyond,
suggesting.
it was very opposite of the gagged and stifled.
Yeah, it's not just voting no and saying your piece and then moving on with business. It was,
Right.
there was active, you know.
I think that cuts both ways.
Well,
I
the
think-
majority has the advantage of being in the majority, and there's a certain advantage that is just in the majority, that they get to promote the majority point of view that they happen to agree with, which may seem unfair to the minority.
But you just can't cancel the First Amendment, like that doesn't work.
This is not about freedom of speech, and it's not
Well, it
about
certainly
canceling
is.
no, it's about the committee's work being a unified effort, and there not being efforts to undermine that. That is,
I totally reject that, particularly the comment, I don't know if this is yours or.
I think these last two paragraphs are my language,
Um,
and they probably were in a moment of distress as I was going through notes and watching videos, and I realized we will edit them.
fair enough, because you not only say that the minority won't be tolerated, essentially the first.
You're modifying the words to your benefit right
All
now.
right, well, I'll leave it in your words, clarity between individuals and their roles as members. And then you go on to say this might require some sort of agreement signed by each member. I mean, this
Yes.
feels like I'm in East Germany circa
No,
1973.
you will find there are many public organizations that have agreements that clarify the difference between your right as a citizen, which is unimpeded, and your work representing the committee. They just clarify the roles. They don't further limit your speech. They just clarify what the roles are. Many public committees have that.
I suppose I would have to see that document.
Not many in Wellington.
Sounds very troubling, to say the least. And I agree with Ralph. This entire paragraph is troubling.
I honestly think the first two sentences in that paragraph, I've included one of them myself, are critical. It's that lack of uniform support, that confusion and distrust of the SBC by the town, which is not a productive work environment. And successful projects result from supportive environments. Honestly, it didn't do anybody on the committee any favors.
So how about this? I will promise everyone on the committee, I'll try to find some new wording. How's that? And you can tell me if you like that or not, and we'll go from there.
I mean, it should
It's
be
not
noted,
set in stone.
that was also picked up by Collier's report as well. If I remember correctly, there's a paragraph in there that says something similar. So it was clearly an impactful part of the process that should, I think, needs to be stated.
I'll find some new wording. We'll see if we can make progress with it.
And I'll submit some.
Sure, if you have suggestions, please.
I'm also, while we're on this paragraph, just powerful methods of the current times. Are you referring to social media?
Yeah, it comes from the paragraph above. Social media played an impactful and often negative role in public engagement. And one of the things that I think the SBC under my leadership failed to do was understand the role that social media was playing and participate properly in it. In an effective way, and market what we were doing properly in social media to try to counteract it, because quite honestly, some of the absolute fabrications that were out in social media became believed as factual by the community. And there were people to the day they came and voted and the day after they voted were absolutely sure of certain information, and that's why they voted, which was completely false information. And they got it from social media. So we have to recognize that that's powerful. And if misinformation is powerful, then clear information should be powerful also.
And Mike, that paragraph is accurate even without a committee. It's with anything that's out there, you know, people believe what's on social media and, you know, really should they? I think Ralph, I know you trust but verify, right? It's that whole thing. You have to verify and look at where the resource is coming from, especially on social media. So I think this paragraph is spot on. And we did struggle with that as well as further up, community involvement and communication. The one thing I would say, Mike, is that I wouldn't just come out and say there was a lack of community involvement and investment in the project. I think that is completely inaccurate. I will say one of the things that is accurate is that we struggled with getting community involvement. Yes, we struggled, but it wasn't a lack of effort. I mean, we put our best foot forward with all the community engagement and the YouTube and just getting ourselves out there. I think we struggled with the best way to do it and trying to tackle the different audience. So, and the other comment I was going to make was about the technical expertise paragraph. I think that's spot on too. I wouldn't touch that one. I think that one's perfect the way it's written. So kudos.
I'm trying to figure out where you are.
It's the,
Technical expertise. I'm still under the,
Did you go back up the page or?
yeah, just up a little bit.
it's below the inserted image of the 1992 report.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't scroll up enough, thank you.
Yeah, so that one I think is spot on. It's generic enough. I agree that we should have brought on, it would have been nice to bring on technical expertise a lot sooner in the process, but we had steps we had to follow too. We had to get the money, right? I mean, that was the first order of business. And how do you do that without doing some due diligence and justifying why you need the money? But yes, I think having them on earlier on in the process would have helped us a bit. But under community involvement, communication, I don't think there was a lack of community involvement, investment in the project. I think we struggled with that whole process. What is the best way? And maybe we just say it like that.
So, yeah, so again, we can work on tweaking this. I think there was early on, there was a lack of community involvement. And it picked up over time and particularly got very active as we got close to the referendum, which is a typical public occurrence anyway. People care a lot more about the budget as it gets close to the budget time to vote on the budget, right? Because they have a lot of priorities in their lives and maybe they can't spend time early in the process. But when it gets close to impacting their taxes, or when it gets close to decision time, they find the time to get involved. And I'm not knocking people, I'm just saying that activity typically picks up as you get to key points.
Right.
So maybe there wasn't a lack of community involvement overall, but there was early on.
Yeah, and I will just add, while I understand where Ralph and Peter are coming from, I think it is important that paragraph that you guys were just discussing. Give me a second here. The last one, a lack of uniform support of the charge by some members. I think, and Mike, you already said it. You were going to reword that. I think it is important to have a group that is rowing in the same direction, especially after key decisions are made to move forward. That's why task groups and committees are created, to get work done. You know, I mean, if we sent our troops out to war and they have a task, defend our country, right? But if they're now starting to shoot at their own people, I mean, what good is that doing? That's not serving the people. And so that's why we need to, this paragraph that you've written here is just express the fact that we do need to, if we're going to be a committee, we're going to be committed to, in our case, the charge was to consolidate. And so we need, as a committee, to consolidate. That's the purpose of the charge. If you don't agree with that, then don't be on the committee. But I understand what you're saying about the about your rights to speak and having different opinions, but you know, if you're gonna get a job done and work towards a common goal, it has to be somewhat uniform, you know, because it creates division within our committee and lack of trust, which is exactly what happened. So that's it.
Other,
Yeah, I want to jump back to the paragraph I was on previously, with, again, social media played a impactful.
okay,
I'm still struggling with this and a full transparency. I don't participate in social media. So Mike, I'm quite sure that you were busy monitoring all of that. I don't know what really occurred there. I'm thinking
a
about,
lot.
but I'm thinking about what Phil commented in terms of moving forward. What is this, what are we going to recommend to a future committee? That makes sense. And the notion of a future committee or this committee or any committee controlling something like that just seems far-reaching to me.
Well, again, classic for
and
you,
if I
Peter,
just
and I'm
finish,
sorry to
like-
pick, no, I'm gonna comment because what you're doing is you insert certain words that are dramatic and potentially inflammatory. Nobody said we're gonna control it, okay? This is a classic tactic. You're gaslighting me now, and this is what's gone on through this whole committee. I never said control it. You have to understand it and address it more properly. We have to be able to counter misinformation with information. Nothing in here says we have to stop people from talking. It says we have to understand where people are talking and we have to meet them there so that they get accurate information.
Not managed in the manner. I didn't read that correctly.
I know, but you always go for the strongest attacking the rights comment. You put words in that weren't in there. This is an exact example of what I'm talking about here.
Okay, let's not get too personal.
I'm troubled by it. Again, in the context of what could be done better, I don't understand the social media part. But I do understand what our process of communication was that we agreed to, which was to put everything through the FAQ. And
That's the statement.
I felt that was very limiting, and I remember a lot of frustration by townspeople when they sat there and wanted to ask a question, and we'd say, okay, we'll revise that in our FAQ.
Yep, and that is addressed in these paragraphs as well, saying that the meetings in public approach has been problematic as well. And it is, I think it's problematic for a lot of the town
I actually
committees.
agree with many of your statements, Mike, and that's one I agree with.
Okay, cool. I feel good about that.
I'm delighted. But I think that's something that we could do better, not we, future committee could do better.
Right, and we as a town, I think, can do better also. I think it's problematic on a lot of our committees.
And agree again, and might even, although I don't pretend to understand much about social media, maybe a similar approach might help there.
I think you might be astounded if you went back and read the transcripts of some of the stuff that went on social media. You'd be astounded by what was going on.
I'm quite certain you're correct. Not an area I grasp.
Okay. I do have a couple. Let me see. Under community involvement, the first sentence, I don't think there was a lack of community involvement. I don't like the word lack of. There was community involvement. I just don't think there was enough. Broader spectrum.
Maybe some semantics,
Broader
but
cross,
point taken.
a broader cross section of the residents that have had to pay for any project that came out of this committee. The other sentence that troubles me a little bit is the ed spec in particular was developed in a vacuum. I don't understand
where is
the
that?
point behind it. It's in
Yeah.
there.
Okay, hang on,
I
I'm
saw that
scrolling.
too.
Come from me.
Okay, here we go.
So
Can I
as an
say it
outsider,
for you?
yeah.
Because I want to know if I understand what you're saying.
So, yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Jim was the one from the get-go that before, even prior to the committee, in public to speak was saying you need visioning. The visioning is what gets the public engaged.
That's what I'm trying to get at with this.
And in my draft, I struck both of those sentences as well. To write it in a manner that is just what to do in the future. And I think that was a big stumbling block and it gets back to the community involvement. It gets back to social media of how do we get more people in the room and what does that look like? I think if we have a bigger budget, we could do that.
Well, it's that, and it's also, it's building big projects like this, building support for such, a significant referendum item happens early. You gotta build it over time. You gotta get that public engaged and supportive of, like, they feel like they have a voice in how that project is being developed. It's why I harp on a lot of that. You gotta get people excited around the idea, like they've contributed to how this goes.
So if I could
That's
word it,
what-
if I could word it in a different way, just to try for this conversation. If the statement looks something like, greater public participation and visioning during the development of the ed spec would have benefited, something to that
Something,
effect.
in those nature,
Get the people more involved with the Board of Ed meetings where you're developing the ed spec. That's what you're saying?
Developed communities, try to work to develop community input and support earlier in the process in a more tactile manner. It goes a long way in the later stages.
I'm saying it differently, and I think it's not necessarily about the focus on the public participation. I think the focus has got to be on the committee. The committee needs to really, and this gets again back to your social media comment. The committee needs to do a better job of identifying avenues to really get feedback. Because we had surveys, we got some feedback, but then there were 1,700 voters, whatever it was, right? The idea here is how do we get greater feedback and participation through the things that we're doing? Right, I think that's the point of it, because we can say participation was low. I don't know if people were watching videos, we just didn't have the data that we had was 100 people, 200 people, right?
Our
We had
sample
the people in
size
the
was very
room.
limited.
It was, and so that has to be a focus of a future committee.
Yeah.
To make sure we get feedback from a broader group of people. So I don't know if it's, I always feel like sometimes when someone says participation, I'm guilty of this, that I'm like blaming it on the people out there as opposed to what could we have done differently. That visioning thing to me is like, we probably should have spent some bucks on that and gotten more people in the room early, because we did a lot of work before we did presentations and we had a lot of work done already. And I think people were like, well, I didn't have any feedback in that, so I'm just gonna fight you on it.
You can identify things like people, secure entrances, separate entrances, those little, problematic issues can be, you start to identify how much of an impact they can have to future discussions. Like secure drop off might have come up as a more, as a bigger item that the committee needs to hit, or, paying attention to circulation.
And that's just ed
And
spec.
if they feel, if the community feels like they're getting involved and they're being listened to, or they've
Yeah.
had the ability to contribute that early on, and you're addressing, and they see it reflected, it's like, yeah, these, it's morale building, and it's,
And they'll also be helping to guide the process more to a
Correct.
product they can support. It's not just getting them to support the project, it's getting the project to look more like what they want.
yeah, it's getting something that gets a broader base of support
Right.
for the
Yeah.
community.
Catherine, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing with what you guys were talking about in it. I was curious, Jim, you mentioned that this would help get some of the community involved in, like ed specs, for example, like what kinds of things would you want to see in an art room, and sort of get them, like you said, hearing them out. Have you gone through something similar where it's worked in a town setting where you've tried to get some town feedback and come up with ed specs? Because in my mind, the ed specs are very specific about what goes into a school, right? And there's certain square footages that you have to meet. And I think a lot of what's in this ed spec are like minimums of what a program would look like in a school. So I'm just wondering, do you have experience going through that, like on a committee and getting the townspeople involved in a set of ed specs?
I'm more on the other end, helping to drive those sessions to, inform the ed spec and inform what the actual needs are, to help understand what the needs are for that particular project. So, going back, getting community input on what types of spaces would you like to see in a brand new school building,
Yeah.
that feel lacking in your current facility. So if you see a maker space becomes more featured, element, you start to prioritize the advantages of what you can do or what this facility could be, because you're identifying what the community is missing or feels is lacking or wants or likes, honestly, and promoting, something's really working really well. We want to support, I don't know, we like a combined cafeteria gym or whatever, like maybe that's something we can consider. You only learn that by really, going beyond and figuring out what the community is going to invest in.
Yeah.
While still being cognizant that the educational mission needs to be, supported.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance, because you've got, the ed specs are sort of framed around what do the teachers need, right? To like fulfill this school and this program. But I think once you do open it up to the public, they may say, a kiln? What do you need a kiln for? We don't do ceramics anymore. We're into something else. And so I think by the one thing we could learn from, if we did this different, or if another committee does it differently, is we might learn about some sort of outside the box learning components that could be implemented into a school that takes the place of something that was simply called a breakout area. Maybe it's called something different now and it's smaller, or I don't know. I think it's a good approach if we could do that. I'm curious to hear what Phil has to say and what kind of struggles we would face if that did get open up to the public or to the community.
I don't think that's an issue. I'm doing it. My thoughts are beyond the ed spec. I think just in general, I'm really focused on community involvement and making it a priority of the committee to really spend time and dollars on it. I think that's what, I'm going to be honest with you, and it's Jim's business, but I'm sure the work that he's talking about is not cheap. But you're investing in knowing what your townspeople will support and maybe what they won't support. And you're also educating people at the same time about what's happening in your schools. If you don't have a child, you don't know. But from my perspective, it's really making a commitment to ensure that you're doing this work early, and you're getting people's feedback early, and the things that we thought were best practice, we even argued over the postcard. We missed that piece. That's something I think we really need to make a recommendation on about, is to take this very seriously about getting the people in the room and getting their feedback. I don't know if that's door knocking. I don't know if it's answering every social media post, and that's just the one thing that someone does all day long. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, and I think that's that one liner in there, the power one. And on my draft, I just separated it out. Future committees should address any and all the powerful methods of the current time. However people are getting their information at that time, we really need to make sure we focus on it and get that information out there. The website's nice, but if nobody looks at it, who
Right.
cares? The FAQ is nice because we were trying to funnel on it and it was easy for us to control, but I don't know if it was effective. Right? I mean, recording meetings, it was effective to a degree. I just don't know how effective. We sent some postcards. I think our postcards were effective. Whether or not we confused people along the way with the information we put in the postcard, maybe we did, but we got to people in that manner, right? So I think that's my biggest takeaway from the community aspect, is just being really thoughtful about how you spend dollars to make sure you're getting the, you know, people involved and they know. And so your neighbor's not going, there's a school building committee?
They're building a new high school.
Right.
Yeah, constantly.
All right, Phil, along what you're saying,
Yeah.
okay, one of my beefs in the beginning, and you know this, was there were no links on the town website for the school building committee
Yeah.
initially. Now, let's be real. What percentage of the taxpayers have a vested interest in the school and what goes on inside
Yeah.
compared to the proportion of the town that has to foot the bill? And you have to capture all of those folks.
Yeah.
And get them enthused about it. You can't just post information on the school website because that misses the biggest chunk of people that are going to be financially affected. And those are the people that you have to convince and, I hate to use the term, arm twist into supporting this.
Yeah, I
And when
think-
that comes too late in the process, then you're fighting a losing battle at that point.
I completely agree with Ralph.
I absolutely agree with that too. There were clear failures in, getting to the right group of people, engaging the right group of people. I think we're all in agreement on that part of it. And that's where a lot of my struggle came with social media, because I tried very hard to maintain the difference between the fact that that is my own social media account. I only commented on social media about things that were already in the public sphere. I only commented on things that had already been on YouTube videos, had been in meetings, were in minutes. I never commented on like the behind the scenes work of the committee or what was going to be, you know, where I thought it was going, because I didn't feel that I should cross the line between doing official business of the SBC on my own personal social media account. So I only commented on what was that anyone in the town could have known about. And a lot of the time I spent my time trying to direct people to the sources of information. Please, here's the link, go to the website, look at this thing. And that was effective in some ways, but it also taught me something. A lot of people months and months and months into the thing said, I didn't know that link was there. Or people said to me, I don't have time to click those links and look at all those documents. This same people who had spent hours on social media that day chirping and saying, what about this? And asking questions. What's going on with this? And I kept saying, please click this link. I brought you the link. Go here, look at that information. The answer is right here.
Be careful, though. Something in what you just said that you have to be very, very careful about. This terminology. You were talking about reaching the right group of people. Watch that phrase. That's a dangerous phrase. Right group of people? Well, what's the wrong group of people? You don't want to put people on
Right,
in that category.
yes, I agree with what you're saying, but you also know we're already talking about that. We reached the wrong group of people in the sense that we didn't reach enough people. We reached the group, we reached the people who are concerned about the schools. We were all just saying it. The people who like have kids in the school who are interested in the
And I
committee,
think
we
that-
reached them better than we
And
reached
I
a lot of
think
the
that
other
was
people
part
in
of the
town.
problem, Mike. I think a
Yeah.
lot of our messaging
Yeah.
for community involvement was directed at what I'll call the Board of Ed audience. And
Right.
those are the people that were supporting the project for the previous 12 years. And I
So maybe
understand
right and
that.
wrong is the wrong words. We reached an inadequate group.
We
but
didn't,
we didn't get enough.
We never
No,
went beyond that. In fact, often we had a refrain from this committee when someone said, well, why are we doing that? And the answer was, well, we've been working on this for 12 years. Where were you? It kind of reminds me of our budget process when someone comes to the public hearing and says, why is this in the budget? And then they're told by a frustrated Board of Finance, and I was one of them,
Right.
where the hell were you in January when we were working on this? You can't do that. So that is not right.
But it's also human nature when you spend 6 or
It
8 months
is.
volunteering your time to
It
build
is,
a
Mike, that's
budget
why I'm-
and someone shows
I'm not-
up at the
I'm not
11th
directing
hour.
this at anyone personally. I'm
Right.
just saying that there's a frustration level with people when they're told that, because
Right.
they're appearing for the first time.
Your language was around like visioning sessions and things like that. Can I just, like a one-liner, consider hiring a marketing firm to engage taxpayers?
it's not marketing that you're looking for, you know, it's,
I just think we have to, I'm trying to focus on that recommendation. What is that recommendation that we're trying to say? Based on your comment.
You don't use marketing in quotes, though.
no, you don't know, I mean,
Sort of.
it's, how do we phrase it elsewhere in here? Hold on. Technical expertise is the word we use. I'd go with that, you know, or something along the lines of that.
Other technical.
You know, having, you know, consider soliciting, professional expertise to guide, advancement of community goals and wants, or, you know, I'm not gonna write fly,
I know you're going.
Maybe community outreach expert. I mean, they have companies that do that and they're not marketing, but they're community
Education.
outreach.
You know, part of a professional,
yeah.
that sort of stuff.
Because we did hire technical expertise.
Right, but we didn't hire community outreach expertise.
Yeah,
We
no, I
didn't,
mean,
no.
It,
I got the notes.
We
That's-
fancied ourselves to be those people.
We did it on, I'm
With
sorry,
all-
the Wilmington way, it was, we did, the slim budget.
Right.
Because we knew that if you put something forward, it might not go. I mean, if you say, and I have an RFP out right now that might do the same exact thing, to be honest with you, but, you know, when someone says she's $30,000 for a marketing firm, or a community outreach expert, that's.
There will be pushback.
Right,
Yes.
They're spending money.
right,
Yeah.
so, but I think that is the point in this whole heading here of community involvement should be the target of the focus of what would we do differently and not say people were not engaged.
the services of an educational planner would help, you know, in the development of the ed spec.
Yeah.
A focus, you know, making a recommendation that it might behoove, future considerations to explain how a school could support a community as well as
Right.
just the school population. you
Right,
know.
right.
The advantage of having a theater space or community gathering space is a public benefit to the town, not just the school community. They can be used for after hours events rather than sitting.
I want to get to Catherine. She's been waiting a while to get her.
Oh, sorry,
Go
Catherine.
ahead, Catherine.
No worries. Yeah, so just regarding the community involvement, I think the one piece of it is, yes, getting more people involved. And it's not the right people or the wrong people, it's just people, it's the community that we need to get involved. But most importantly, they need to stay involved, because a lot of times we would get, you know, everybody's lives are busy, right? We're all wearing 100 different hats. We hop on when we have time to hop onto the meeting, find out what's going on. And Mike, you mentioned it earlier. Some people are like, I'm not going to click on this document. There's like 100 pages there. Well, it's like a soap opera. If you miss an episode, you're going to miss some data. And so our challenge was, how do we get people the most accurate information so that they're up to speed when they do step in and they can get involved? And some of the ways we've done that was we've done the presentations. We came up with a summary presentation that Mike, you narrated and sent out. And we also had the Willington Wire that was also published so that people could know, you know, what's going on with the SBC. And then the last thing, I just lost it. Anyway, I just lost it, but there was one more thing that we did that
We definitely did do a lot, but we realize now that we missed some stuff.
yeah, and so that's the challenge, really. How do you keep people engaged, you know, because we did all these things. And how do you keep them?
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. The good news is, like a soap opera, if you wait 10 years, it starts over at the same place again. Right?
Oh, so the last thing
Maybe
was
more
the
than 10 years,
FAQs, the FAQs document. That was the
Yeah.
last one.
Sorry, I mumbled it. I should have said it louder.
Yeah, and we tried, you know, we did try to, you know, get that to be sort of a document that if people did step in, and they had those resources, they could read it. But, you know, community is a two-way street. It has to go like communication. You can't have a communication and productive conversation with just one person. So it's hard. It's hard to figure out what that formula is to engaging the community and keeping that engagement. If anybody has any answers and has perfected it, please raise your hand.
Okay, some comment. I had a couple comments.
Yeah, I just want to kind of wrap a rope around where we are here,
Okay.
try to pull this together. So, I want to make sure that if it's a topic we've talked about, that everyone's had a chance to talk about where we are before we go to the next. Are we caught up?
Well, I'm on the same,
Seems like it.
same.
Oh, you're on the same
On
time.
the
All
same
right,
topic.
carry on.
The line that you used, you know, you were talking about how people would comment on social media. And, you know, there's only one forum that I comment on, and has absolutely nothing to do with schools. But I don't want to click on that link. I don't want, here's the problem. One link is fine if it takes the person to the pertinent information. But, and forgive me, Phil, when that link takes you to the Board of Ed homepage with subsequent links to get into things having to do with the school, that's where the frustration starts to come in.
Yeah.
On social media, you don't need multiple clicks to badger somebody or to badger a topic. You know, it's finding it. The Wellington Wire, yes, there was a great piece in the Wellington Wire. Where was it buried in that on-screen
Yeah, I don't think
document?
that's a great tool.
People had to wade through it to find it. That's where they
Already
start to get
Outdated
frustrated.
stuff too. We're beyond it. It was general stuff.
Yeah. And that's part of the key to communicating. People want things right off the bat. Now.
Yeah.
Quick, multiple clicks don't work as well as,
No, I agree with that.
you gotta smack them in the head, pretty much, figuratively speaking. Yeah, but
Yeah, I know what you mean.
it's gotta come up on that
Put it
screen.
in my face.
Right.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah.
That's why I was so
It's definitely
irritated about the
drifting.
town website.
It's definitely drifting towards what they call the mobile model, which is essentially icons. You open this, you open one screen and it has an actual, like a button for land evaluation, a button for ed spec. It's all on one screen. You see all the buttons right there. You pick the button you want to click it in. You don't drill down. People don't want to drill down anymore.
No. You gotta, I hate to use the term, you gotta smack them in the face with it. It's gotta be blatant, it's gotta be obvious. That's one of the frustration I have with numerous websites. Too many clicks, and it gets irritating as hell.
Yeah.
Okay, next topic.
Yeah, next topic. So then people have other areas of the report they want to talk about.
I can get onto the, almost the last page. The bullets below, and it kind of relates to the paragraph above that I objected to. Despite the failed referendum, school building committee majority believes, or that the word majority, I don't know, we can argue about that, I suppose. And the second bullet, and of the properties examined at the time of the study. I hate to use the word available.
Yeah.
You see where I'm at, Phil?
Where?
I think I did. He's just.
It was right below the concerning paragraphs about social media and all that, the next section, the bullets.
Future committees, doesn't keep down next page.
I did a similar thing up top, Ralph, where there was something like that, and it was just like, that wasn't.
Or the most effective.
I did the same type of thing.
The property.
Just changed the
Oh,
words.
thanks.
And then just getting into charge issues, the very last comment, the town should consider its land inventory and perhaps sell unneeded parcels to purchase more suitable lot for a future school, especially the Youngerman property. That's beyond us in many respects. excess property is not the purview of the school building. I understand the point.
So go back to the charge letter. You have the charge letter, right? I feel like I had a, I don't think that's exactly, I don't think that's my comment, but I had a similar thought based from the charge letter. There was something in,
That's all I have.
Collier summary has that recommendation too.
oh, you know what? It was from the Collier summary and from the previous building committee, because the previous building committee did say something about,
We anticipate a new school building being needed.
and I think they actually recommended selling the Youngerman parcel in the previous committee report too, I think.
I think you might be right.
Yeah. So I think that was a carry forward from. the
No, I
previous-
understand.
Yeah.
I just question whether that
Yeah.
belongs here, that's all. I understand the reason
Yeah.
for it.
Right.
And I think we've invested some stuff in the Youngman property and selling that at this juncture, maybe.
Well, right, but it could be investigated. It could be looked at. The town needs to stop holding on to it, thinking they're gonna put a school
On it.
That's the line.
If it's not.
Right, if they,
If it's not legitimate open space and held as dedicated open space, fine.
Which is not.
Maybe that's the way to look at it.
Right. Yeah.
Town should consider divesting of non-committed open space, non-open space property.
right,
But I don't think that's gonna generate peanuts in plant,
no, the only possibility is should someone get interested in developing that $3 million parcel next door, and then there's a large parcel on the other side. It's in between two very large parcels. Should there be any sort of industrial growth or development growth that's looking at either of those properties, since it sits between them, it might make it excellent. It might have value.
But therein lies the problem, and this is off topic, of our planning and zoning commission not wearing their planning hat adequately when talking to potential developers.
And you're right, there's nothing we can do about that. But we can throw a little nugget out there.
Anything.
Based on our experience, this is what, we're handing this off to the powers that be.
And for now, I have no further comments.
But I think, just to piggyback on that, Ralph, I think the third point in college makes it based on the availability of suitable parcels, the lack of availability of suitable parcels for a new school. Given the difficulty, and you guys explored quite a bit, it might behoove the town to secure adequate parcels, knowing there may be a need down the line.
Which supposedly was the intent of the Youngerman property.
I can follow what you just said. I developed a list of properties suitable. Now, and one of the things that Colliers did that I disagreed with, and Phil, you might have had a hand in this, is you looked at individual parcels, but you did not consider parcels abutting owned by the same owner. And I think we think of one property or two parcels directly across 74 from Glass Factory School. They're ideal for school, just as ideal as the Glass Factory property. Never popped up on the list. The two contiguous parcels. One of them did. And that's what I found to be a little bit short-sighted about reviewing land parcels.
So that's an excellent point. And not to bring up an old thing we talked about already tonight, but why didn't you say that during
I was
all
gonna
the
say,
meetings that you were in?
yeah, he was, Ralph, you were on the committee. Why didn't you mention it?
That's right, Ralph.
I handed the list over, but maybe I didn't need to explain about contiguous parcels.
Apparently you did.
I would
Because we missed
think,
it.
I would think Colliers would have the wisdom to recognize that.
Listen, hindsight is 20/20, right?
I know.
I'm sure as you look back, you say, well, maybe a Collier should have, and you also think, oh, I should have mentioned that, right? Because I'm
No,
looking back and
now
I'm
I'm
thinking you
thinking-
should have mentioned that.
Yes, now I can see that I should have mentioned that, but we assume that our consultants have.
Well, I think Colliers defense, I'm
Expertise.
sure they were relying on a generated property search from land use, that. And was it
Based on parcel sizes and-
Yeah, it's.
Did you look on their list and one of the two
One of
was
the two was on there.
evaluated? And what was?
I think it was short in acres.
Short in acreage, okay.
It might have been short. and
Because there's
buildable.
definitely some elevation changes back in that area, that there.
Between Peter's property and 74?
Yeah, there's definitely.
See,
some-
on that road.
property?
The warehouse site?
No, this coming back this way towards 174,
I'm back towards 74.
on the west side of the Parazak Pond area,
Yes,
the old road.
yes.
But I think in the list, I did comment to that effect, because there were like 4 parcels I found that were contiguous under common ownership. And I think I made mention of that in the list that I put forward, but I don't think that Scott found it.
You're off the hook, Ralph.
I don't blame Scott, he's not here.
In the spirit of doing things better for a future committee, the referendum results page. I see there's some subjective commentary there that the question may have been confusing. Sorry, it's the page that has the 3 questions.
Yep, referendum results and then, yeah.
I see this, you must have included this, Michael, perhaps you felt many taxpayers do not understand why the questions were worded as such, bond council, OCGR, confusing the
Yep.
voters. Possibly so. What I think was very troubling to the townspeople, and something, an issue I raised on this committee strongly, was prior to referendum, not having a public hearing, as we traditionally do in town for all big things, plus the budget. And even worse, not having a traditional town meeting where we have discussion and then vote to adjourn to referendum. You remember where there was some sort of construct where it was a directed town meeting by the executive branch of the town government that the attorney had put together for, I think you explained to me once, Mike, why, but I thought those were both major shortcomings that in the future we could address better by just following our normal practices. We have a public, in fact, for something as large as a $68 million project, I would even suggest 2 public hearings would be valuable. The first one to remind everyone what this is, and then the second one, so you can come back with all their questions, and then go to a town meeting where there's discussion and then a vote in the traditional way that our towns always function. I think that's very important. I'd like to see it done in the future.
I will agree on the part of the town meeting, it did not work smoothly. It did not work the way it should have worked. I was not involved in how that was created and what the structure was for that meeting. That wasn't a
Completely
committee,
understand.
that wasn't a committee task. I will say that I'm sure there was no ill intent, but what ended up happening was, in anticipation of a lot of speakers, the time that was set very tight, anticipating a lot of speakers. It ended up being restrictive and caused agita in the community. Clearly lessons learned there. I can't speak as the committee chairman on that because it wasn't our thing, but as someone who lives with the results of it, the committee lives with the results of it, and we can recommend in the future a town meeting that is, that allows a little bit better engagement. Again, I don't,
Engagement, but
and
functions as a town meeting where we vote.
so,
And I think when the moderator started cutting people off because they would veer a little bit off the specific question on the ballot, irritated a lot of people, that's right.
well, I think, I think there is a need to keep, to keep things on task, but again, what we can say is it didn't work out well. And that we can
Agreed.
certainly come up with a recommendation for the future.
I think that-
I hate to dig up old bones, but since you dug them up, the town hearing thing, I feel the town hearing thing is just,
Public hearing.
I'm sorry, the public hearing is for the most part semantics. You and I even discussed if there was actually any functional difference, and you said, well, there isn't any actual functional difference. It's just the name of the fact that you call it a public hearing. The public hearing is a discussion, right? It's a question and answer.
But a very
Many of those
important
were
one.
done.
But a very important one.
Yes, but the exact same things happen. If we took one meeting, I actually was tempted to try to ask the town fathers, for Pete's sake, literally, not the phrase, for Pete's sake, could we just hold a hearing so we can say we did? But I realize that is just a waste of government effort, just to hold a hearing so that you would stop saying we didn't have a hearing. And I'm just telling you my thought process.
Sure, sure.
And so I gave up on the idea. And you and I had conversations about it. The fact of the matter is we had multiple events that operated the same as a hearing. The only technical difference is the technicality of how you advertise the meeting and post the meeting. The function that happened at the meetings is exactly the same. Question and answer.
This is why I disagree with that, for what it's worth. This is not intended at you as
No.
chair, it's just an observation on my part. There is a fundamental difference between the public hearing and the community engagement events that we had. When there's a public hearing, there's a neutral moderator. He allows questions to be brought forward. People are given time to speak. There's no cross conversations. Those are very different from the community. Like I was at the library engagement with Phil. That to some degree is steered by Phil. He's a superintendent. He has a stake in this. He wants to have a new school. I fully understand that. That's different than a public hearing that's totally objective, where a moderator is running that meeting, allowing people to participate in a framework that leads to the people that invented our form of government were not stupid people.
Right, I agree.
They understood that we had to have these kinds of conversations and that kind of
Right.
setting prior to a town meeting. So I
Well,
disagree.
we did exactly those things at Hall School. People brought up questions, they could be online with questions.
Even those were dominated by our committee, by Scott Pellman.
Well, because we were the people with the answers to the questions. We were the,
But the public hearing moves beyond that. It's a chance for the public to participate. I desperately want them to for the Board of Finance, for the budget.
who was at those meetings? That was the public.
Yes, but, well, we can agree to disagree.
You guys are not
To me, it's a totally,
not gonna agree.
totally different
It's-
forum, but okay.
It's what I know this is a logical fallacy, but I'm gonna use it anyway at the risk of being picked on for it. It's a distinction without a difference.
We can agree to disagree.
Okay.
But I'll also say on the town meeting portion of it, now that is also a legal event.
Hmm,
And that is the first town meeting I ever attended in 35 years in Willington, where it self-adjourned to a directed outcome. Think about that for a minute. That is fundamentally different than voting on the
that,
call.
I know
to go
that
to
was
referendum.
wrangled, I know that was wrangled with for a long time coming up to it. And that was directed by multiple layers of legal advice, whether any of us agrees with it or not, legal advice, the requirements of the bond council and all that other stuff. I don't know. I don't know that I expected that myself either, and it does feel a little abnormal, but we
Well,
can't fix that. All we
I'm
can
not
do is
trying
we
to-
can
I'm not trying to
throw.
like 20/20 hindsight everything.
Right.
I'm saying, moving forward.
Yep.
If we have a traditional town meeting where people are comfortable with the
Right.
format and how it functions.
Right.
We have a much better chance of success than if we tell people, well, the outcome is determined, but come anyway.
So I think the good news in this part of our conversation tonight is that there were many people who expressed concerns about how the town meeting was run. I think it's very legitimate for us to find some way to reference it in our report, because it's a lesson learned
It's gotta be
that we
mitigated
can,
in.
that we can provide as valuable going
I'm glad
forward,
we can
right?
agree on something.
Right? So far in this whole process, you are the only person who keeps coming to me about the public hearing. I don't know if anyone else is worried about that, or certainly not as much as you are. So, let's play with the wording and see if we can come up with something agreeable.
Fair enough.
Anything else? Catherine, any other comments on the draft so far?
No.
Okay, so again, to review where we are, I think, I'm trying to get us back into momentum here as we're coming to the end of the summer. I think we all want to put a bow on this. So if you have comments, I know we're all busy, try to get your comments to me in the next few days. send them to me and Phil as before, because it's easier for him to do the editing at his computer. He knows Google Docs better than I do and all that. Get the comments back as soon as you can, just so we can work on wordsmithing and cleaning and altering and get a new version out for people to look at. And let's see if we can start getting closer to agreement on how all this stuff should look.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Almost.
You all set, Phil?
Yeah.
Catherine, you all set?
Yep, all set.
Entertain the motion.
I'm.
Do we have a person to speak at the end?
We don't.
Thank you.
Second. We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye and wave
Aye.
goodbye, Catherine.
Um,
Thank you all for your work tonight.
3:24.
We are
Thank
adjourned
you.
at 8:24. Thank you.